Welcome to Excel Magic Trick number 1055. Hey, if you want to download this workbook, click on the link below the video. Hey, we got a great video here. This is a grading example. So here's our grade book. We want to be able to enter in any particular assignment for a student and have the actual percentage and decimal grade, but only for these two assignments. I don't want to have to wait till the end to get all of the assignments in to then report to the student what their percentage and decimal grade is. In essence, this will allow me to always report to the student their current grade, even though some of the assignments have not been handed in. All right, I'm going to delete all this. The trick is that we need to, at any moment in time, get only the cells that have content. So in this case, there's 3 assignments turned in, and compare those totals to only the totals up here for the maximum points possible. The total is easy. We're going to use the sum function. And the keyboard for the sum function is Alt equals. Now, the dancing ants did not guess right, so I'm simply going to redirect it. All right, those are relative cell references, so when I Control-Enter and copy this down, it will get the total. Wow, so this student got a 20 and 18, but on this test here, they got 75. So now we need to come over here. We're going to calculate or create a formula for a percentage. But the hard part is calculating the denominator for our percentage calculations. Because what do we want to do? We already have the total. That's the numerator. We need to take 110 and divide it by 100 plus 20 plus 20. So 140. Now think about this. This is all the numbers. And we want only the numbers in this range when cells down here are not empty. So here's how we do it. Denominator, we're calculating the total from this range based on a condition or criteria from this range. We'll use the SUMIFs. And I'm going to use the SUMIFs. Now, SUMIF, you can use that if you have 2003 or earlier. I'm going to use the SUMIFs. This is in 2007, 10, and 13. I like SUMIFs because the screen tip is much more polite. The names on the screen tip are explicit. Sum range, that means the numbers I'm adding. Now, for the denominator, I'm going to highlight all of these numbers. I'm going to have to hit the F4 key to lock it, put those dollar signs, because when I copy the formula down, I always want it locked on these numbers up here. Comma. Criteria range, well, the criteria for not empty is going to come from that range right there. That's a relative reference. So as I copy it down, it needs to move. Comma. The criteria is not empty. In double quotes, you have to type not, which is less than, greater than. Now, this criteria here tells SUMIFs and SUMIF and COUNTIF and AVERAGEIF and all those types of functions to add when the cell is not empty. Control-Enter and copy it down. So at any moment in time, it gets the total from here, but based only on the cells that are not empty. Now we can simply use that in our denominator. Numerator divided by denominator. Control-Enter, double-click, and send it down. Now, where these divide by 0 errors, let's fix that. Notice I have the whole range highlighted. The active cell at the top, I can hit the F2 key. I'm going to use the if error. If error. Now, this is in 2007 or later. I'll show you an alternative to this if you're working in an earlier version in just a moment. But all it does is it looks at this. If it's an error, it's going to put whatever we put in the value if argument into the cell. Otherwise, it'll just run this formula and put the number answer in the cell. So I'm going to come to the end, comma, and in double quotes, I'm going to put some text. No scores. Now, this double quote is how we put text into a formula. Over here, we had to use double quotes to put this comparative operator. That's just a byproduct of how they program SUMIF and COUNTIF and SUMIFs and COUNTIFs. All right? Anytime you have text, it's got to be in double quotes or it won't work. Now, to repopulate this edited formula into the whole range, Control and Enter. So now If a student takes this quiz and gets 14, the current total is 14. The current percentage grade is 0.7. That's 70%. Why don't we go ahead and highlight these and add a percentage number format. I'm going to come up to the Home ribbon, use the drop down and say percentage. Now I kind of want to show more decimals, so I'm going to increase the decimals. All right, so now how do we look up the decimal grade? Here's our first column in our table that has the percentages. And over here, here's the decimal grades. In this cell I6, let's do equals VLOOKUP. Now V is for vertical. The table is orientated vertically. I'm going to say, hey, look up this percentage, comma, the table. We got to highlight the table. Now the first column of the table has to be sorted in ascending order. Highlight the first two cells, use the keyboard Control-Shift down arrow, and then F4 to lock it. So now we have our table. You got to tell the VLOOKUP, is it column 1 or column 2 that contains the thing you want to get and bring back to the cell? It's our decimal grade in column 2, so we type it 2. This is an approximate match lookup. We have our first column sorted, so I'm simply going to leave that fourth argument off. Control-Enter, double-click, and send it down. Now here we use the if error. We could use the exact same construction here. Instead of the divide by sum ifs, we just use VLOOKUP. But let me show you an alternative. So if you're working in 2003 or earlier, you can use the if function. Now let's talk about what the count function does. The count function counts numbers. So if I give it a relative range right here, it is going to count some number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if the student has entered done some assignment. Otherwise, it'll give me a 0. Inside the if function, the if function will interpret any 0 as false and any non-zero number as true. So I can use this, and I'm going to copy this. I copied it in edit mode. I just wanted to show you visually that before we use it in our formula. F2. And I'm going to put the VLOOKUP inside the if. Now the if needs a logical test. That's true or false, but I'm going to Control V to paste my count. Remember, any non-zero number is true, any 0 is false. So this will trigger either a true or false. Comma, if it comes out true, which means there is a count, it'll run VLOOKUP. Otherwise, the false, end double quote, close parentheses, Control-Enter, and then double click and send it down. And so now we have a completely beautiful grade book that'll tell us the current grade for any particular student, regardless if they have missing assignments or not. So this student right here, 75, current grade is 80% and a decimal grade of 2.3. Now one last thing, the VLOOKUP here, since some of you may be new to VLOOKUP, what is VLOOKUP doing? Notice it's looking up an 80%. Down here, VLOOKUP is looking up an 80.71. The way VLOOKUP works, or at least the way to think about how it looks something up, and let's take this 80% as example, is since we're doing an approximate match and the first column is sorted from smallest to biggest, VLOOKUP takes that 80%, it races down the column, and when it runs into the first number bigger, it jumps back one. And that's how come 2.3 got assigned to student number 4. For this one, why did it get 2.4? Well, it took this 80.71. The VLOOKUP said, OK, I'm going to look that up. Races through the first column. It bumps into the first one bigger and jumps back one and gets the 2.4 and reports it back to this cell. All right, we'll see you next trick.